Dive beneath the waves with us as we unveil 5 maritime mysteries. These tales have haunted sailors and captured imaginations throughout the ages. But before we begin, keep your eyes peeled for a hidden Easter egg in today's video. Comment down below when you spot it. Now, let's set sail into these mysteries. 1. The Elbe. The SS Elbe was a transatlantic ocean liner built by Norddeutsche Lloyd, one of Germany's leading shipping companies, in 1881. Designed to transport immigrants and cargo across the Atlantic, the Elbe was a sturdy vessel, capable of carrying over 1,200 passengers and crew. The 4,510-ton steamship was equipped with modern safety features for its time, including watertight compartments. Despite these advancements, the ship's ill-fated final journey would expose the inherent dangers of early ocean travel. On January 29, 1895, the Elbe departed from Bremen, Germany, bound for New York with 354 passengers and crew aboard. The passengers were a diverse mix of immigrants seeking a better life in America, seasoned travelers, and wealthy individuals who could afford a more comfortable transatlantic crossing in first class. As the ship sailed through the English Channel on January 30, thick fog descended upon the waters near the Dutch coast, reducing visibility to dangerous levels. Around 5 a.m. on January 31, disaster struck. The Elbe collided with the smaller British steamship Crathy, which had also been navigating through the fog. The Crathy struck the Elbe on its starboard side, ripping a massive hole in its hull. Within minutes, seawater poured into the lower decks, overwhelming the ship's pumps and causing the Elbe to list dramatically. Survivors later recounted how many passengers were still in their cabins, unaware of the severity of the situation, while the crew tried frantically to launch lifeboats. Chaos reigned on deck, and only a few lifeboats were launched successfully before the ship sank. One notable survivor was Reverend William Passavant Jr., who managed to board a lifeboat with a handful of others, although hundreds more perished. The sinking of the Elbe shocked both Europe and the United States, where news of the disaster spread quickly. In the aftermath, there was a great outcry about the inadequate safety measures on ships, especially regarding the number of lifeboats and the preparedness of the crew in emergencies. Theories. Navigational error in the fog. The prevailing theory is that the dense fog that enveloped the English Channel severely hampered visibility, leading both the Elbe and Crathy to miscalculate their respective positions. Although both ships had been issuing fog signals, the restricted visibility made it nearly impossible for either vessel to take evasive action in time. Communication breakdown. There is also speculation that the fog signals may not have been properly interpreted by the officers of the Elbe. Some suggest that the crew failed to adequately respond to the Crathy's foghorn warnings, and by the time the two ships were visible to each other, the collision was inevitable. Lifeboat failure. The Elbe's disaster was exacerbated by the failure to deploy lifeboats effectively. Some theorize that inadequate crew training and disorganization played a significant role in the high death toll. Only 1 or 2 lifeboats were successfully launched before the ship sank, leaving hundreds of passengers to drown in the freezing waters of the North Sea. The sinking of the SS Elbe was a watershed moment in maritime safety, especially regarding emergency preparedness and lifeboat protocols. In the years following the disaster, international maritime organizations began pushing for reforms to ensure that all ships carried sufficient lifeboats and that crew members were properly trained in evacuation procedures. The disaster also underscored the need for improved navigation techniques in foggy conditions, leading to advancements in radar technology in the following decades. 2. The RMS Atlantic. The RMS Atlantic, a transatlantic steamship owned by the White Star Line, was part of a prestigious fleet designed to compete with Britain's Cunard Line. Launched in 1871, the Atlantic was one of the fastest and most luxurious vessels of its time. It could carry up to 1,000 passengers and was powered by both sail and steam, making it a symbol of modern maritime engineering. On March 20, 1873, the Atlantic left Liverpool for New York, carrying 952 passengers and crew. As the ship approached the final leg of its journey near Nova Scotia, the captain made a fateful decision to divert toward Halifax to refuel, fearing they might run out of coal before reaching New York. However, due to navigational miscalculations and poor weather conditions, the ship veered off course. In the early hours of April 1, 1873, the Atlantic struck rocks near Mars Head, Nova Scotia, causing the ship to take on water rapidly. The boilers exploded soon after the impact, contributing to the chaos as the ship broke apart. Of the 952 passengers and crew aboard, over 550 died, including many women and children. Despite the treacherous conditions, some of the survivors were rescued by local fishermen from Prospect, a small village on the Nova Scotia coast. The villagers' quick response and bravery saved many lives, although they were limited by the lack of adequate rescue equipment. Some accounts of the disaster were preserved through the diaries and letters of survivors. These documents offer harrowing insights into the moments leading up to the wreck and the terror of being trapped aboard a sinking ship. Theories. Navigational misjudgment. One of the most widely accepted theories is that Captain James Williams miscalculated the ship's position as it approached the rocky coastline. The ship was traveling at a high speed, and the crew was unaware that they were much closer to land than expected. Some speculate that the ship's chronometers may have been faulty, contributing to the navigational error. Poor visibility and weather. The night of the wreck was marked by poor visibility and rough seas, which may have further confused the crew. Fog and darkness made it difficult to spot land until it was too late to alter the ship's course. It is also believed that the crew underestimated the strength of the current, which pushed the ship toward the rocks. Inadequate lifeboats. The Atlantic was not fully equipped with lifeboats for all passengers, a common issue for ships of the time. Additionally, many of the lifeboats were destroyed when the ship struck the rocks, leaving passengers with few options for escape. Some survivors reported that the crew had been slow to respond to the disaster, exacerbating the high death toll. The sinking of the RMS Atlantic was one of the deadliest maritime disasters of the 19th century and led to widespread calls for reform in lifeboat regulations and safety protocols. The disaster also underscored the dangers of navigational errors, prompting advances in shipboard navigation technology and the implementation of more stringent safety measures for passenger ships. 3. The SS Arctic. The SS Arctic was one of the jewels of the American Collins Line, launched in 1850. The ship was designed to compete with Britain's Cunard Line and was known for its speed and elegance. It could carry up to 400 passengers and 150 crew, and its regular route was between New York and Liverpool. The Arctic was one of the fastest steamships in service, often completing the transatlantic crossing in under 10 days. On September 27, 1854, while en route from Liverpool to New York, the Arctic collided with the French vessel Vesta off the coast of Newfoundland. The collision occurred in heavy fog, and while the Vesta survived the impact, the Arctic suffered catastrophic damage to its hull. Water flooded the engine room, and the ship quickly began to sink. The tragedy was made worse by the crew's selfish actions. The officers and crew members abandoned the passengers, boarding lifeboats and leaving hundreds of civilians behind to drown. Out of the 400 passengers and crew, only 85 survived. Women and children, who were given no priority in the evacuation, were among the first to perish. Captain James Luce remained aboard the Arctic until the very end, refusing to abandon ship. He survived the disaster but was left adrift for 2 days before being rescued by a passing vessel. His decision to stay behind earned him a mixed legacy, as some viewed it as an honorable act, while others questioned his role in the ship's mismanagement. The Arctic disaster caused a public outcry, particularly in the United States, where the Collins Line had been a source of national pride. The revelation that the crew had abandoned the passengers led to widespread condemnation and calls for better regulations governing crew conduct in emergencies. Theories. Fog and poor visibility. The dense fog that enveloped the waters off Newfoundland is considered the primary cause of the collision. Both the Arctic and the Vesta were navigating through thick fog when they collided, unable to see each other until it was too late to take evasive action. The Vesta's crew believed their ship had been sunk, but in reality, it was the much larger Arctic that suffered catastrophic damage. Hull vulnerability. One theory suggests that the Arctic's hull, while built for speed, was not robust enough to withstand the impact with the Vesta. The Vesta was a much smaller ship, and the fact that it survived the collision while the Arctic did not has led some maritime historians to speculate that the Arctic's construction prioritized speed over durability, leaving it vulnerable to such incidents. Crew negligence. One of the most controversial aspects of the Arctic disaster was the behavior of its crew. Numerous survivors testified that the crew had abandoned ship as soon as the lifeboats were launched, leaving women and children behind. This has led to speculation that the crew was poorly trained or simply overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. The SS Arctic disaster led to widespread changes in maritime law and safety regulations, particularly regarding the conduct of crews during emergencies. The Collins Line, once a symbol of American prestige, never recovered from the disaster, and it eventually went bankrupt. The tragedy also prompted the US government to institute stricter regulations on shipbuilding and crew training, laying the groundwork for future maritime safety protocols. 4. The Princess May. The Princess May was a steamship operated by the Canadian Pacific Railway, running along the rugged coastline between Alaska and British Columbia. Launched in 1888, the ship was primarily used to transport passengers and cargo, and it quickly became a vital link between the remote communities of the Pacific Northwest. On August 5, 1910, while en route from Skagway, Alaska, to Vancouver, British Columbia, the Princess May ran aground on the rocky coast near Sentinel Island, Alaska. The incident occurred in dense fog and rough seas, which made navigation particularly treacherous. The ship struck a reef, and within minutes, it was precariously perched on the rocks, with its bow rising out of the water at a sharp angle. What made the Princess May grounding famous was not just the dramatic nature of the wreck, but the fact that it was thoroughly documented. Photographs of the ship perched on the rocks became iconic, appearing in newspapers around the world and cementing the incident in maritime history. One of the first ships to reach the Princess May after it grounded was the Jefferson, a steamer that was carrying a photographer. The photographs taken of the ship's bow jutting out of the water at an almost vertical angle became one of the most famous images of early 20th century maritime accidents. Despite the dramatic nature of the wreck, all passengers and crew were safely evacuated, thanks to the quick thinking of Captain McLeod and the calmness of the crew. The lifeboats were launched in an orderly fashion, and nearby ships quickly arrived to assist in the evacuation. The lack of casualties was considered a near miracle, given the precarious position of the ship. Theories. Navigational error in poor weather. The leading theory is that the Princess May ran aground due to a combination of poor visibility and rough seas. The ship was traveling through waters that were notoriously difficult to navigate, especially in foggy conditions. Some have speculated that the captain may have misjudged the ship's position, leading it to strike the reef. Misreading of instruments. There is also some speculation that the ship's navigational instruments may have been faulty or misread by the officers on duty. The waters near Sentinel Island were well charted, and the fact that the Princess May ran aground despite being on a well-traveled route has led some to suggest that human error played a significant role. The grounding of the Princess May remains one of the most famous shipwrecks in Canadian maritime history, largely due to the dramatic photographs of the ship perched on the rocks. The ship was later salvaged and returned to service, continuing to operate for many years after the incident. The Princess May's grounding highlighted the importance of proper navigation training and the dangers posed by poor weather conditions, prompting improvements in navigational aids and safety protocols in the region. 5. The Clan Macquarie. The Clan Macquarie was a British cargo ship launched in 1943 during World War II. As part of the Clan Line, It was primarily used to transport goods between Britain and various colonies around the world. After the war, the ship continued to serve as a cargo vessel, ferrying goods across the globe. On December 31, 1953, the Clan Macquarie encountered a violent storm while travelling through the Minch, a strait off the coast of Scotland. The storm battered the ship, and despite the crew's best efforts to navigate through the treacherous waters, the Clan Macquarie was driven onto rocks near Borth, on the Isle of Lewis. The ship broke apart on the rocks, and the crew was forced to abandon ship in the face of rising seas and gale-force winds. Miraculously, all 66 crew members were safely rescued by local villagers and the Coast Guard, though the ship itself was a total loss. The storm that wrecked the Clan Macquarie was one of the worst in recent memory, with wind gusts exceeding 80 miles per hour. Despite the harsh conditions, local villagers from Borth risked their lives to rescue the crew, using small boats to ferry them to safety. Their efforts were later recognized with awards and commendations. The Clan Macquarie was carrying a valuable cargo of whiskey and other goods at the time of the wreck. Much of the cargo was lost to the sea, although some of it washed ashore, leading to stories of locals salvaging bottles of whiskey from the wreckage. Theories. Storm force winds. The prevailing theory is that the Clan Macquarie was simply overpowered by the storm. The Minch is known for its rough seas and strong currents, and the ship was caught in one of the worst storms to hit the region in decades. The captain and crew likely did everything they could to navigate through the storm, but the force of the winds and waves made it impossible to keep the ship off the rocks. Engine failure. Some have speculated that the ship's engines may have failed during the storm, leaving it at the mercy of the winds and waves. There is little evidence to support this theory, but it remains a possibility given the severity of the storm and the ship's inability to steer clear of the rocks. The Clan Macquarie disaster is remembered for the heroic efforts of the villagers who rescued the crew in the face of extreme weather conditions. The ship itself was a total loss, but the crew's survival was seen as a testament to the strength of community and the bravery of those who live in remote, storm-battered regions. The disaster also underscored the dangers of navigating through the Minch, especially during winter storms, leading to improvements in weather forecasting and emergency response in the area. These detailed accounts highlight the complexity and dramatic nature of each shipwreck, exploring the circumstances leading to their fates and the impact they had on maritime history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible maritime mysteries, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more intriguing stories from the world of the sea.